So girls, this will be your last video for this first chapter, okay? That is part 6 of your first chapter. So in your part 6, you have professional ethics. Professional ethics basically is the ethics which encompasses both the professional as well as your corporate ethics, which is like the basic behavior which is expected by the professionals. Okay, next you have the principles of professional ethics. Principles of professional ethics are firstly integrity. Integrity means you need to be very honest and you need to have a very fair attitude and you need to be very straightforward. Next is objective. Objectivity means you should make sure that you are treating everyone on an equal basis and you are working in the best interest of the company and you are not judging anyone randomly. Okay, next is professional competence and due care. Professional competence and due care means that you need to have enough competency, you need to have enough qualification as required by the company, you need to have effective skills and knowledges to carry out your activities in the company. Then confidentiality means you need to make sure that whatever information is being given to you, you do not have to reveal it to anyone outside the company. You need to have something known as the professional behavior. Then after that you need to have a professional behavior, that is you cannot just act like casual relationships in the organization. You need to abide by the rules and regulations, you need to follow certain laws. Next is purpose and scope of professional ethics. Why do you require professional ethics is what we are going to look into now. Basically, it is why do you require is basically it lays down the standard of integrity, professionalism, confidentiality, which all members of association shall be bound to. Okay, basically it helps the members to follow all of these. That is why it is important. Next, candidates will also undertake to adhere by the codes, that is will follow the rules and regulations. Then disciplinary and disputes committee, acting in accordance with the provision, will, in case if someone is not following the rules and regulations or in case if someone is not abiding by the rules and regulations, then they will be charged with penalty and fine if they are not if they are not acting in accordance with the committee. Then you have your audit threats and safeguards. So moving on to your next slide, you have your audit threats and safeguards. I do not know if the PowerPoint slide is very visible to you all. Kindly adjust with the same and just follow your textbook PDF which I have sent to you all. Okay, so talking about your audit threats and safeguards, it says, okay, basically when you're conducting auditing also has its various threats and you need to know how you need to safeguard your auditing. So basically, firstly, auditing is independence and is potentially affected by the following threats. The following threats are firstly self-interest. Self-interest is basically if a team member is not in accordance with the group. Okay, in case if one person's interest is conflicting with the other person, or one person's interest is conflicting with the team interest, then that tends to become the threat to the becomes a threat of the auditing. So what are the basic examples in which the threat can include is basically, suppose if you're taking suppose for example if you're concerned about possibility of losing the engagement, okay, or in case a direct financial interest or material indirect financial interest in assurance of the client. Suppose you had to give a guarantee to the client, you had to give a security to the client, so one team member is not acting in accordance with it, so it tends to create conflict between the two and it is one of the threats to the auditing. Next one is self-review. Self-review is basically you are going to review yourself. Okay, that is self-review threat occurs when, for example, that is any product or judgment of previous engagement or non-assurance engagement needs to be revalued in searching conclusions on the assurance engagement. Suppose for example this only occurs if you are going to again revalue all of your previous engagements. Okay, in case if you're going to check your previous engagement, only on basis of that there are on basis of that, if you're going to come up with conclusions, on that basis conclusions might differ and conflict might arise. Then, when a member of assurance team was previously a director or officer of the assurance client or was an employee in position to exert direct and significant influence over the subject matter of the assurance engagement. Suppose if the person has prepared the assurance report and suppose if it is not prepared very well, then people might tend to point out mistakes or errors, right? So that will also become one of the criteria on which the threat might arise. Next one is advocacy threat. Advocacy threat is basically wherein one occurs when the member of the firm assurance team promotes or may be perceived to promote an assurance client position or opinion to point the objectivity may not be provided or compromised. For example, let me explain it to you in a very simple way. That is, dealing in or being a promoter of shares or other security is an assurance client. Okay, and so this only happens in case if you're dealing with assurance, and in case if you're talking from a client's position, and if you are assuming things, and in case if the team members are not cooperating and coordinating with each other. Then familiarity threat is basically in case this occurs in case the virtue of choice of relationship with an assurance client. That is, in case of the assurance clients, its directors, officers, or employees, or a firm member of the assurance team become very sympathetic to the client's interest. In case if they are becoming very if they are very getting along with the client's interest, if they're becoming very close to the client or anything as such, then in case this happens, if the assurance member if the client is the family member of the assurance team or etc., so this happens, this is one of the familiarity threat. Okay, then intimidation threat. These threats are very important from the exam perspective, so please look into the audit threats and safeguards from a very close manner. Next one is intimidation threat. Intimidation threat is basically, it may be deterred wherein you are acting objectively and exercising professional skepticism by threats. Okay, that is basically for example, threat of replacement over disagreement with the application of an accounting principle. Suppose if they are disagreeing with you, and in case if you have the position to be replaced, or in case this again happens in terms of the assurance clients. So these are your audit threats and safeguards. Next, you have your possible safeguards to manage threats of independence. That is, again, you have the safeguard threat that will be falling into three categories. That is, safeguard created by profession, legislation, and regulation. Under a safeguard created by legislation, and what comes is education, your continuous requirements, professional standards, etc. You have to read all of this. Then next one is your safeguard with assurance clients. Now, what does the safeguard with assurance clients include is that is, management who appoints the firm, persons other than management ratify or approve the appointment. Then the assurance clients that has competent to employees' managerial decision and internal procedures. The next is safeguards with the firm's own systems and procedures may include firm-wide such as firm leadership that stresses importance on independence. Okay, suppose the firm is stressing a lot of importance on the independence and expectation of members. Then you have your policies and procedures, you have your internal policies in case if the policies are too much. So because of all of this, your threat might arise, right? But with these policies and procedures, you will be able to safeguard that particular threat. So that is why threat safeguard is following into three broad categories, and with three broad categories, you can classify the safeguard interest and you can minimize the threat. Next, you have providing opinion on the financial statement. The providing opinion on the financial statement is one of the most important role of an external audit. So what is happening here is you are understanding the entity, its environment to provide an opinion. Then you are obtaining sufficient evidence. Then independence. Okay. Then you have your factors to assess internal control. Then you have the role of internal audit. So let's look into what is the role of external audit. Okay, so regarding your role of external audit, first one is you need to provide an opinion. Okay, as we all looked into the following thing, now let's move on to the next topic. Next, you have the factors to assess your internal audit. Now, what are the factors that will have an effect on the internal audit and how you need to assess it? Firstly, you need to design your internal control. Okay, to assess this, firstly you need to understand the control design. That is how you are going to get the financial evidence for the financial statement, whether the financial statements have been created in terms of the operation, then how you're going to review your assets, your monitor controls, etc. This will be in the this will come under designing the internal control. Next, you have risk assessment. That is, you will be assessing the risk that is in the financial statement level and the balance sheet level. That is, while carrying out transaction, what is the risk, and while recording the transaction, what will be the risk. You will be assessing this. Next is financial statement level. Financial statement level, what is happening is the risk of material misstatement. Okay. So whether you are noting down every material, you're noting down the exact price of the material, etc. So this is one of the mistake that happens in financial statement level. Next is account balance or class of transaction. Account balance or class of transaction is wherein you are evaluating an evident for the matter which is concerning to management assertion. Okay, that is, you are evaluating the financial position. You have to disclose all of the financial statements to the auditor, and you have to provide all of the necessary evidences saying that you have recorded all of the financial data perfectly as provided. Okay, then next one is substantive procedures. So substantive procedures, what is happening is under here, that is, what is happening is the internal auditors are providing direct evidence. Okay, the internal auditors are providing direct evidence about how many material misstatements are there, then what is the specific amount of balance, then what are the classes of transaction, then whether they have verified the accounts, what is the kind of risk that they have detected, etc. This will be assessed by the internal audit. These are the factors that need to be assessed by the internal audit. These are the 5 factors. Okay. Next, you have the role of the internal audit. So basically, role of internal audit is again again very similar to your previous roles that we've been looking into from the last slides. Now, firstly, they have to verify the existence of asset, okay, and recommend proper safeguards to the protection. So they have to verify all the assets are existing or not, and they have to provide proper safeguarding for these particular assets. They have to provide protection to safeguard these assets. Okay. Next, they have to evaluate the adequacy of the system of internal controls. That is, how adequate it is, how the internal control is. They have to evaluate all of this. Then recommend improvements on control. In case if they feel that the control system is not very effective, then they have to recommend necessary improvements. Then assess compliance with policies and procedures and sound business practices. So they have to assess whether the company is complying with the rules and regulations, and are they practicing any sound business practices or not. They have to assess this, that is, they have to examine this. Okay, next is assess compliance with state and federal laws. Okay, whether the company is complying with the state laws, with the federal laws, and the contractual obligation. Next, review operations or programs to ascertain whether results are consistent with the established objective, whether the operation program are carried out or planned. Okay, now next they have to check whether all the objectives are being achieved, whether whatever operations are being carried out is in good benefit of the company, whether they are able to achieve objectives. They have to assess. Then next one is investigate reported occurrence of fraud, embezzlement, theft and waste. In case if they have investigated any reports regarding frauds, etc., they have to again communicate the same to the management and the audit committee. Next, you have your limitations. That is, what is the limitation are? It is minimum time gap, because we've already discussed that what are the limitations. That is internal and external audit go in hand with each other, right? So both of them will be conducted at the same time. So minimum time gap is there. Then you do not have full proof. Then the professionals are outsiders. Okay, then internal audit reports are not accepted by the shareholders, and it is only used by the management. So this again becomes one drawback. Then internal audit becomes better in case if it is used by managers. Then internal auditors are employed by the organization, which can impair their independency. So what happens is another internal audit disadvantages in case if they are not able to practice what they have objective of. Okay, then internal auditors are not required to be professionally qualified, so there might be limitations in their lack of knowledge and expertise. Please look into from the textbook. I have sent you the textbook PDF, so please look into the textbook while you are studying. Okay, then the cost of installing is high. So these are the basic limitations of internal audit. Now moving on to your next topic, you have the outsourcing of the audit function. Now your outsourcing of the audit function basically means, outsourcing is basically you are calling someone with an expertise knowledge to come and work as an auditor in your particular company. Okay, so let's look into the advantages and disadvantages of outsourcing. So what is happening is, outsourcing is basic practice of the organization, okay, wherein some or all audit function of the independent party affords an organization numerous benefits. So basically the company might outsource their auditing activity to any of the auditing firm. So what happens is, the advantages are, you can greater focus on the cost and function efficiency of the internal audit function. Then staff may be drawn from a broader range of expertise. Basically you will have a lot greater range of expertise. Everyone will have greater knowledge about technical expertise, etc. Then risk of staff turnover is passed by outsourcing. You do not fear that the people might leave your firm. So risk of staff turnover is also reduced. Then you have lot of skills which are readily available. Then cost of employing permanent staff is avoided. So you can avoid the staff only on temporary basis based on contract. Then improving independence. Then you have lots of access to new marketplaces, technology, audit or new audit technology, like example new software like Tally, etc. Then reduce management time in administrating in-house department. Like you do not have to waste time in administrating your organization in-house department. You can reduce the cost and you can enhance your efficiency. Similarly, along with your outsourcing of auditing function, internal auditing function, you have disadvantages along with the advantages. So the disadvantages have the following thing, that is you have the conflict of interest. Then the complete process is being outsourced, because of which it will become very costly. Then you have a lot of lack of knowledge. Then the decision may be based with cost effectiveness. Then flexibility is missing, okay, lack of control of standard. Then risk of blurring roles between internal and external audit. So these could be your possible disadvantages of outsourcing your entire internal audit function. Next, you have the content of audit review reports. Now, what should the audit review report contain? Okay, these are the basic elements. These are the most important elements that the report must actually contain. First one is the title of the report. What is the report about, and whether it is an internal report or external report or director report, accountant report, whatever the report title is, it has to be there. Then addressee is basically the auditor's report should be addressed to a particular person, to whom it should be forwarded, basically to whom the report is prepared for and to whom the auditor is addressing from this particular report. Then opening of an introductory paragraph, then that means he needs to give an identification of what is the financial statement that he's audited, what was the name of the financial statement or name of the company, and how much time he has taken to audit this particular financial statement. Then he has to give clarity between the responsibility between the management and the auditor. Then scope paragraph is basically he needs to give the nature and scope of work which is performed by the auditor, and whether the auditing is being accepted by the general standard, is it accordance with the rules and regulations by the Audit Committee of India, etc. He needs to give all of this scope information in the scope paragraph. Next one is opinion paragraph. Opinion paragraph is what is the auditor's opinion while he is preparing the auditor report, how the company needs to improve, and whether the financial statements have been given to him in a proper manner, whether the financial statements have helped him achieve the whether the financial reports have helped him achieve the auditing effectively, and whether he has been able to carry on the audit effectively. Okay, the next one is signature. He needs to provide, the auditor must give his authorized seal and signature in the report. Okay, it should be written, it should be sealed and signed and dated. Then place of signature and date of report. All of these are the most important elements of the audit review reports. Okay, next is audit observation. Now looking into audit observation, basically it means you have your differences, that is custom duty expenses, that is what is the audit observation. Then rubber cess, then stock transfer. This is for your reference if you could read. Okay, this is just a reference that you can read and understand. Okay, so with this we come to an end with your chapter 1, and I will meet you all in the next video with chapter 2. Thank you.